Hello, today we're going to discuss one of the topics in the AQA module in sociology, beliefs in society. In this topic we're going to focus on religiosity in the contemporary world. We're going to consider three things. What is this topic about? Who are the main authors in this topic? And we're going to critically evaluate it. Next, secularization theory says that religion has lost its influence over society. Brian Wilson, one of the writers, argued that secularization is the decline of the social significance of religion's practices and organization. So, in terms of what is secularization, it refers to the decline in the importance of religion. Some of the other writers, like the founding father Auguste Comte, argued that science would be the final stage in the development of human thought. He thought modern society would be dominated by science and not religion. Likewise, Max Weber argued that in the age of technology and rationality and bureaucracy, this would take over and sweep away magic, myth, and tradition. So the impact of secularization, the decline in the importance of religion, can be seen in the UK. For example, in the UK, church membership fell by over 1 million from 1992 to 2013. Attendance at church ceremonies, such as baptisms and marriages, has also dropped since 1980. Many parents are now opting for non-religious naming ceremonies instead of baptisms, and preferring to cohabit instead of traditional weddings at the church. However, it is difficult to measure secularization by church attendance. For example, people may attend church even though they don't believe in God, out of respect for their friends or their duty to other people. In certain cases, parents have helped their children get into certain schools through church attendance. For example, bogus baptisms are referred to when infant baptisms have been declined. Those of older children have been increasing in recent years. Research indicates that this is because many faith schools, which tend to be higher performing schools, will only take baptized children. Baptism thus becomes an entry ticket to a good school rather than a sign of Christian commitment. Davy argued that people may not attend church because of their lifestyle, even though they believe in God. This makes it difficult to measure secularization according to church attendance. Also, 59.3% of people in England and Wales still identify as Christian. However, this isn't a very reliable measure of secularization, as people may identify as Christian but not be religious. Religious pluralism. Pluralism gives people choice. Religious pluralism has both created and has been influenced by diversity in types of religious organizations and beliefs in society. Some sociologists argue that religious pluralism can explain secularization. Others argue that is evidence against secularization. For example, The increase in New Age movements since the 1980s can be seen as proof that the sacred is becoming important again. Also, it can be argued that pluralism is evidence of religion being transformed, as people are more free to search for their own religion and religious meanings, and another term for this is to become spiritual shoppers. Pluralism gives people choice. People are freer to choose any religion or reject religion altogether. Although some people in modern society have joined new religious movements, they are still a small proportion of the population, and therefore the growth in new religious movements has been overestimated. Postmodernists such as Lyotard argued that people have lost faith in old religious organizations. Desacralization is where the supernatural belief is less of a force in society. Weber predicted the desacralization in his idea of enchantment. He thought that magic and myth were less important in modern society. Weber believed that the rational ways of thinking and acting would overtake religion. He argued that in the 16th century, the Protestant Reformation, led by Martin Luther, started a process of rationalization which gave a scientific outlook in modern society. He believed that the medieval Catholic worldview that dominated Europe believed in a that supernatural forces were present and active, influencing human life, would be overtaken by Protestantism, which saw God as outside of the world and that he did not intervene in it. This meant that things that once were attributed to the supernatural could be now explained using scientific methods. This is also known as the disenchantment of the world, to remove magical ways of thinking and religious ways of thinking and replace it with rationalization. An example of this might be to instead of praying, relying on prayer, using to cure an ill or sick person, but the reliance on medicines in modern society. The church has lost some of its functions. For example, since the 19th century, the state has taken over many of the functions that the church used to perform. Thus, where religion once pervaded every aspect of life, it has increasingly been confined to the private sphere of the individual and family. For example, until the mid-19th century, the churches provided education, but since then it has been provided mainly by the state. Although there are still faith schools, these are mainly state-funded and must conform to state regulations. Similarly, although there is a legal requirement for schools to provide a daily act of collective worship of a broadly Christian character, a BBC survey in 2005 found that over half the secondary schools in Wales failed to comply with this. The point is that the church has become more and more separated from the state. Differentiation is where society has become more specialized, so each institution has fewer functions than it did in the past. That is one example of that. Disengagement is when the church becomes separated from the state and as a result has less influence. Parsons' 1974 claimed that the church has lost its functions and become disengaged from state and politics. Religion, however, religion can still be significant in everyday life and encourage shared values. Religion is still closely linked to politics in many places, such as the Middle East and Northern Ireland. Secularization of religious institutions is when the church becomes less religious in its beliefs to fit in with the rest of society. For example, many churches now will allow divorced people to marry. However, that being said, the New Christian Right are an example of where the religion doesn't change and does not fit in with society. That, for example, they are still against divorce, homosexuality, and premarital sex. The more extreme end of the religious right are also against women working outside of the home. That being said, secularization is very difficult to measure. This is because there are different measures of secularization. Some are more valid and than others. Secularization, for example, secularization is a general term that it's difficult to measure. It's difficult to measure the significance of religion in comparison because sociologists use different definitions of religion. Some use substantive definitions, which are concerned with the sacred, whereas others use functional definitions and saying what religion is for, creating value consensus. So when we're measuring religion, or if we're not measuring the same thing, then are we really measuring the decline of religion itself? To measure whether society has become secular, you have to compare it to the past. Some sociologists argue that we see the past as a golden age of religion, where everyone believed and no one was skeptical. This is oversimplified. So this casts doubt of whether religion has declined in such a as steeply as suggested. Also, the term secularization is a general term that sometimes applies to Christianity. It's important to know what is being measured: the decline of religion in general or the decline of Christianity in particular. Some sociologists have argued that secularization can also be ethnocentric, focusing on Christianity and what predominantly the mainstream does. Without appreciating the changing and the developing changes of other religions such as Islam, Hinduism, and Sikhism. In terms of a question that might be helpful to consider, all of that's been discussed today, you could analyze why religion has lost some of its significance in today's society.